All right. 1 second here. All right. So, hey, hi, hello, and good evening, everyone. My name is Alum Jules, and I am the Deputy Director for the USAID Donald M. Payne International Development Fellowship Program administered by Howard University. I'd like to start by thanking you all for joining us for our second Backstop Week webinar this cycle. These webinars provide the opportunity for you to learn more about the unique career backstops within USAID's Foreign Service. Specifically tonight, we shall be highlighting private enterprise, program officer, and agriculture officer backstops. And we're joined by our colleagues at USAID, Lori Brock, the Deputy Director for the Center for Economic and Market Development, and the Backstop-21 Private Enterprise Coordinator, Aaron Scherf, the Payne alumni and current program officer, Clare Masson, the USAID program officer and the acting director for the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights, and Governance. Claire, thumbs up there if I, close enough. Okay, excellent. Jacob Auer, our agriculture development officer, William Bradley, the agriculture development backstop coordinator, and Tanya Jackson, the deputy director of economic growth and agriculture development. As a reminder, this session is recorded, and you will be able to find the recording for tonight's webinar on the Payne Fellowship YouTube channel within 48 hours. Each USAID backstop will be given 8 to 10 minutes to speak about their backstops and experiences, and we will close the session with a Q&A segment where you all as audience members may ask the speakers questions they may have. Without further ado, let us begin, and I shall actually turn it over to Lori Brock, representing USAID Private Enterprise Backstop, to start, followed by, again, our colleagues within Program Officer Backstop, and closing with the Agriculture Development Backstop. With that, Lori, the floor is now yours.
Thank you so much, Nye. It's my pleasure to be talking with all of you this evening. I have Lori Brock, the Backstop 21 coordinator for private enterprise officers. I have worked and lived in about 20 different countries, and it's really fun and challenging work. I think one of the more fun stories I have is when I'm working in West Africa, I worked with about 100 local apparel manufacturing firms and working with them on how to export to the United States under AGOA. And then also supporting them in a trade show here, one of the New York Fashion Week trade shows, as well as in Las Vegas, setting up booths and connecting them with buyers. So we also one time did a fashion show at the Nigerian embassy here in Washington, D.C. So it's there's a lot of fun work. If I don't know if I have the privileges yet, but I did have a PowerPoint. If not, probably best I don't share, because I kind of had like a funny sort of video about tariffs and bananas that was more as appropriate for both the Backstop 21s and the agricultural officers, but perhaps since it's being recorded, I'm going to refrain from using it. The other work that I usually put private enterprise officers into 3 buckets, and one of them is private sector development, supporting the private sector on growth and opportunities and entrepreneurship. The other would be finance, investment, banking, including microloans. We work with the with several of the development banks, as well as there's other U.S. government agencies that work on finance with the DFC, MCC, and USTDA and others. And then trade as well. And I connect a lot of our private enterprise officers with the U.S. trade representatives as they're negotiating trade agreements. The Department of Commerce comes to us frequently and connecting us with private sector partners looking for opportunities in countries where we work. And I think one of the most interesting things is that we support, I'm also an industry liaison for the apparel and textile industry. I work with the Gap, all over the world. They're working in Indonesia. They're working, they're looking to perhaps work in Africa, work with Mars Candy Corporation, which also works with the Backstop 10s, all around exporting and farmer income in West Africa, as well as they're doing work in Indonesia. And so I think that this is, I think, one of the more fun parts. Right now in my office alone has partnerships with about 75 different private sector companies, like the Gap, like Walmart, Maersk, Cargill. Those names may not be familiar to you now, but they're important names to know in the global economy. And they support USAID activities, and they also make them more sustainable in the countries with where we work. We also do things like the business enabling environment, looking at business registration, what if is it taking too long, legal and regulatory reform. I've worked on the tariffs in different economies as they're looking to set up regional economic unions, such as ECOWAS or UEMWA in West Africa, or APEC and ASEAN. So it's super fun work, and of course I highly recommend it. Right now we have anywhere between 100 and 150 private enterprise officers as they move in and out of the backstops, and I keep pretty connected with them, and like I said, connect them with industry and the U.S. trade representatives. So I think for now I'll leave it at that and wait to hear if you have any questions. So I'll pass it over to Aaron. Thank you so much.
Great, thanks so much. So if I'm next, my name is Aaron Scherf. My pronouns are they, them. As far as I know, I was the first non-binary Foreign Service Officer in USAID and one of the youngest ever to join at 25. So very happy to be a Payne alumni and very happy to see everyone's interest in the program. I'm a program officer and here in USAID Colombia right now. I'm ending my first tour as a Foreign Service Officer. I spent some time in Washington that I'll get into. But first, to quickly go over what the program office does. So the program office is it's poorly named because we do a little bit of everything. So the program officers, the Backstop 02, we're mostly in charge of the strategy of the mission, kind of the high level thinking, how we report to Congress, how we monitor how our activities are doing, also in charge of the budgeting of all of our activities. But for me, the most exciting part is that we also handle all of what we call cross-cutting issues, such as gender integration, inclusion of ethnic and indigenous communities, inclusion of youth in our programming, inclusion of private sector representatives. And so we get to do a lot of this kind of connecting the dots between all of the great work that our missions do in terms of our programs, and saying things like, have you thought about how this clean energy, electrical grid program could do better to integrate indigenous communities into their work, or do better to make sure that more women are hired into the workforce, into these companies. And so, for me, it's really about being able to kind of instill and integrate my values. So I came into USAID really with this kind of strong passion for advocacy. And so I think that the program office is a really great place where you get to look at the entire mission's portfolio of activities, be that agriculture, economic growth, climate and environment, migrant integration, whatever it may be, and think about how we can make it better, how we can be more inclusive, and make sure that all of our programming is not only ethical but effective, because we're considering all of the different important populations in the countries that we serve. So that's what's exciting about it for me. The other thing is you get to look at the kind of big picture strategy. So what is our 5-year plan in terms of what we're going to do here in Colombia, for example? So it's not just about, I think our technical officers do a great job of kind of managing the day-to-day of the programs, but we try to think about, how is this contributing not only to, our Biden-Harris administration goals in terms of our kind of overall politics for the world, but also how is the host country government's policies integrated into this. And so we try to look at that kind of big picture and say, how do all of our programs fit together cohesively into that? So it's a very exciting office. I think that, sometimes we get trapped into, we also manage the policies and procedures and some of the back office things, like ensuring that we're following the rules of how to properly procure services from a contractor. But I like to think that all of that is really just opportunities to kind of integrate what I was saying about the kind of values-driven approach that we have. And so it's very exciting, especially, we tend to work really closely with our mission directors, the leadership at all of the USAID missions, as well as with the interagency of the State Department, the ambassador, everything like that. We're really tied into how the State Department and USAID are working together at all of our embassies. So very kind of, if you're a kind of more pensive thinker, big picture or holistic person that likes to think about development theory, then I would say that the program office is a great place to be. If you're interested in kind of the monitoring and evaluation, how the impact evaluations run through, a program office is also good for you, as well as if you're really passionate about how the budget kind of turns into programming. So how do we turn the kind of money we get from Congress into what we're doing? So all those things make for great program officers. So my career with USAID, as I said, I came in as a Payne Fellow, and importantly, I came directly out of my undergraduate and then Fulbright program. So like I said, I was 25 when I came in. So I think it's very important to note that you can be a foreign service officer and be an effective foreign service officer without years and years and years of experience working in international development or working in the government. So if you don't currently have, 10 years of working with Commonics or 10 years of working in Congress or anything else like that, it shouldn't be a barrier. Especially that's what the Payne program is all about, is making sure that people have access to these opportunities. Because I always say this, that the Foreign Service needs your perspectives and ideas, more than I think that we bring a lot of great important things as Payne alumni into the Foreign Service by coming at it with a perspective that is not the kind of typical institutional knowledge, but we have usually this kind of passion for the advocacy of what we're doing. And so I think that if that really strikes a chord with you, then I think that, you definitely need it in the Foreign Service. I came in as a, first generation college student. My family had no connection at all with the government. My dad's a plumber. My mom teaches preschool. So, that it's also good to kind of bring this perspective that it's not just the Washington perspective. A lot of people come from kind of the political circles. And so it's important to bring that diversity as well. Upon joining USAID, it's also good to know that, everybody's pretty much coming in at the same level. If you have 15 years of experience or not, you typically come in at the entry level of the Foreign Service, and everybody's doing the same job. So again, it's a very flat organizational structure. There's not this kind of hierarchy and rank that plays out as much as in, say, the State Department. And so you really have an opportunity to make a difference just by the kind of validity of your ideas, by kind of the passion of your arguments, by your willingness to kind of do the research and get to know your programs or your country and make good points. And I think that's really important for anybody coming in through the Payne program to know, is that, you really can make a difference just by raising your hand in a meeting and saying, do we forget, to include a gender integration angle on this? And I've actually, just by saying that in a meeting, really opened up opportunities to make programming more inclusive. And so I think it's really important for us to remember that you don't need to have all this wealth of experience. It's helpful, but it's not completely necessary to be effective. With that note, I spent over a year of training and rotations in DC. So after you do your grad school, you spend all that time learning the technical knowledge. You then spend over a year usually of training in Washington. And so if you don't know all of the kind of USAID policies and regulations and everything that goes in with government funding, that's your time to learn it. And so you really get the opportunity to learn everything you need to know to be an effective Foreign Service officer in that time. So I was assigned to Colombia. Fortunately, it's a great place. And then I knew zero Spanish. They sent me to learn Spanish for 6 months. So again, there should be no barrier in terms of your prior experience to being able to effectively serve wherever you go. And so that was really great for me. I love the opportunity to learn Spanish. I love the opportunity to serve here in Colombia. I've had the great chance to work in the program office here on all aspects of our portfolio, like I mentioned, with a big focus on diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. So I started our missions DEAA committee, and have been really pushing a lot of great policies and procedures, not only within USAID, but within our entire embassy. So again, coming in with a relatively little background, just by kind of being willing to do the work and look into what are good ideas and hustle to make them happen, was able to really institute some good advancements in terms of our inclusion and accessibility and equity here in the embassy. Also, we extend DEA into thinking about inclusive development. As I mentioned, with a big focus for me has been on kind of gender integration, especially LGBTQI advocacy. Our group of volunteers has led the kind of pride celebrations here at the embassy for 2 years now. And not only are we participating in all the marches and celebrations, we're also kind of really helping to push the advocacy here in Colombia on issues like safety for transgender community activists, on banning conversion therapy throughout Colombia, and that's supporting the kind of Colombian government priorities. So those, I think, are some things that I'm really proud of that I've been able to help with. And again, that's coming at it with, relatively little kind of professional experience in that field, but just a real passion and a sense of what needs to happen. And so just that's my one takeaway that I want to give to everybody. First of all, that you can be effective regardless of where you're coming from as a Foreign Service officer. So abandon the imposter syndrome. You will be just as good a diplomat as anybody in your embassy, and you have just as much to say as the ambassador does, as the mission director does. So you can bring in good ideas. And then the other thing is, as you're looking to join the Foreign Service, it's very much an art, not a science. If the Payne program doesn't work out in one application round, apply again. I mean, I know Payne alumni that got it on their third, even fourth attempt at applying to the program. So there's nothing to say that just because if you get bad news on the first time around, doesn't mean you can't reapply after going and doing some volunteering or working somewhere else and gaining more experience, and then applying again. It's expanding as Masson all the time, and so we're always looking for more people. And so I encourage everyone to apply as many times as you need to if you think this is the career for you. And then if you in the meantime, there's always great opportunities. Most Foreign Service officers actually come in after experience working for a contractor or an implementing partner or something that's USAID adjacent. So there's lots of USAID jobs that aren't directly in the Foreign Service. So you can think about the civil service, you can think about personal services contractors. There's a whole wealth of opportunities out there that I had no idea what these were before joining, but it's good to look into them if the Payne Fellowship doesn't work out in your first try. And so definitely keep in mind all the different ways to join the Foreign Service, and that your experiences are valued and valuable as you're applying. So I'll end with there. Thanks so much. And I don't know who I'm passing it to. I'm so sorry.
I think that's okay. I think you're passing it to me. Hi, everyone. I am also a program officer. I've been with USAID for 13 years now. I spent the last 13 years overseas, 5 different countries. Loved my time there. I came back to Washington just recently. When you're in the Foreign Service, they try and encourage us to come back to Washington at least every 12 to 15 years. Kind of depends person to person. Some people come back earlier or later, depending on what their family needs are. And so as a program officer, I came back to help stand up a new program office for a bureau here in Washington. When I think about the different roles in the Foreign Service office, when I applied, I was applying to anything. I just wanted to get my foot in the door. And I stand by that as a model. And had I known about the Payne Fellowship, I would have applied. It's a great opportunity. And I've worked with many of the Payne Fellows while they were Payne Fellows and then afterwards, and great colleagues and friends to this day. But when I think about now that I'm in and understand the differences between the different backstops, if you're really super passionate about a topic and kind of want to know everything there is to know on it and are really digging deep, then you may be interested in one of our technical offices. For me in the program office, I like to know a little bit of everyone's business. I like to know a little bit about what everyone's doing, but I don't want to get stuck on one topic. And so that's why the program office has been a really great placement for me. I've been able to support our technical officers in their passion. I've been able to work with our contracting officers to figure out how we can better reach local NGOs and organizations. What are the barriers that we're putting up to applying and partnering with USAID? I get to work with other donors. I think Aaron really covered a lot of the wealth and breadth of what the program office does. And the only 2 things that I would highlight was I'm really passionate about communications, and all of our comms work falls under the program office, along with everything else that we do that he mentioned, including M&E and strategy planning and monitoring evaluation. But it's been really fun for me to work in countries to understand how to best reach audiences. And how we can use our communications, not just to talk about what USAID does, but to help advance the ideas that we believe in. And so that's been a great part of working overseas and really learning. And then the other is the relationship with the interagency and the embassy. The program office is often the key point of contact for USAID within an embassy. kind of outside of the mission director and the head. So if there's a working level contact who wants to come over and learn about what USAID is or how to work together, the program office is often the conduit for that. And for me, it's been really rich to build relationships and learn what all the different parts of the embassy does, learn what all these diplomats and all these military officers do overseas. Like I had no idea the Department of Commerce had people, or the Department of Justice. And then in building those relationships, finding ways that we can kind of exponentially expand our programming. How can we leverage their expertise? For example, a Department of Justice, prosecutor who's working overseas, how can we work with them and the Department of Justice to advance what USAID is doing on justice issues? What can the military bring to bear? When I was in Albania, we found out that some of our Department of Defense had stuff that they just no longer needed. And we started going through that, and we found some things listed as containers, and we were able to bring them over to Albania and turn them into greenhouses. And so this was excess supplies that the US government no longer needed. The military was very excited to partner with us to bring over these supplies that they were no longer working. And for us, it allowed many, many farmers to build greenhouses, expand their production. We really worked to ensure that it was women-led families that were getting these. It was a great experience. So I think it's a wonderful program, and hope that we're able to have a little bit of a conversation afterwards. I don't want to take too much more time, so I'll hand it over to the ag folks.
Yeah, my name is Bill Bradley. I'm the Backstop coordinator for agriculture, and I cannot share my screen apparently, so I will not show what I was going to show. And I'm going to pass. I'm going to instead quickly pass off to Jacob Auer, who's a Payne fellow, and then to Tanya Jackson, who will talk a bit about their pathway into the Foreign Service, and maybe in a few minutes I'll be able to share my screen. Go ahead, Jacob.
Thanks, Bill, very much. Yeah, so as Bill mentioned, I am an agriculture officer. I'm Backstop 10, also a Payne Fellowship alum, similar to Aaron, class of 2021. So that means that I just joined USAID, just joined the agency this summer in June. And so I'm still very new. I'm in that rotation stage that Aaron mentioned here in Washington, D.C. I'll be here for several more months and getting my rotations in. And yeah, I want to talk a little bit about my path to getting here. And I resonated quite a bit with some of the things that Aaron said about their path to getting to USAID and to the Foreign Service. I also was just not connected at all with US government, with USAID, and didn't really know much about it. I'm a farm kid from Oklahoma. I grew up on a cattle ranch, and I studied agriculture and engineering in school. And so that was very much my interest, my field, and sort of came about this career and came about this, about the Foreign Service through Google searches and my own research. That was really what kind of led me to, or sparked my first interest in doing this type of work, is just reading about what USAID is and kind of the history of the agency and people's stories. That was a big part of it as well. And that's what led me to the Payne Fellowship program. And that's what, when I decided to apply for it. So all that to say, you've made it this far where you've raised your own awareness about the Payne Fellowship program. And that means you're in the right place. Just because you don't have this background, or you grew up knowing about USAID and about the Foreign Service, that doesn't mean that you're not fit to be at this point right now, to be applying for the Payne Fellowship program. I also want to hit on something that I've noticed. So like I said, I'm an agriculture officer. I'm in Backstop 10. But so far in Washington, D.C., I've been working in the Center for Nutrition. And that was really interesting to me, because I don't have any background or technical expertise in nutrition. And so I think it's true that you can choose to really zoom in on something that you're super interested in a technical backstop, and and really hone that skill or hone that field of expertise. But you don't necessarily need to be pigeonholed at all. You, even as a technical officer, you have opportunity to expand outside your comfort zone. So me working in the Center for Nutrition, me also, I recently got a detail to work on a global learning and evidence exchange event, all focused on how we can increase our mission colleagues' abilities to integrate gender into their programming. And that goes for all agriculture programming, water programming, resilience and food security and nutrition programming overseas. And that's another area that is not necessarily my wheelhouse. But here I am working in it. And so all that to say, even if you choose to go into a technical field and you're really excited about agriculture like I am, that doesn't mean at all that we can't expand a little bit and get out of our comfort zone. So with that, I'll pass it over to Tanya.
Thank you, Jacob. I think what I want to do is just kind of tell you about my pathway to being an agricultural development officer. Right now, I'm an FSO, agricultural development officer with 13 years of experience. I've worked in 3 countries with 2 tours in Afghanistan. Currently, I'm posted to Haiti, and I'm the Deputy Office Director for the Office of Economic Growth and Agricultural Development. But, you know, when I think about how did I get there, it was kind of I have an eclectic background, so it wasn't a direct path. It was more circuitous. I think it was Aaron who mentioned his parents, or maybe, yeah, it was Aaron who mentions his parents. Well, my parents were New York City cops. They were police officers. And actually, my mother was a detective. She outranked my father. And so I always believed in public service. So I thought I would be a teacher, someone who would, you know, work in the public sector. And so I went for an undergraduate degree. My background was in anthropology and sociology. I was planning on teaching, and somehow or another, I ended up in a master's program at Howard. I was in the botany department, but I did all my research in the pharmacy department with Dr. Kapadia, and I did phytochemistry work, and I loved it. And the next thing I knew, you know, I was going for an advanced degree, and I went to University of Illinois and started over again for whatever reason, had to do another master's, but that was fine. And then I went to do my PhD work, and I decided I was gonna, you know, work in Puerto Rico. There was a species of plants, they were trees, and I did a population study. And so I, you know, had to learn more phytochemical techniques, molecular techniques. I did morphological work. It was like a complete population study in Puerto Rico. And so what was I going to do? I thought I would teach at a university. I ended up working at FDA. And it was the technical background that I had that I was able to like parlay or transfer those skills into review work. I was looking at food safety issues. So I ended up working at the Center for Food Safety and Applied Nutrition, CFSAN at FDA. And I was a regulatory scientist. Well, at some point, I left FDA, and I decided I wanted to go back to government after a few years. And there was an opportunity to join USAID. I wasn't quite sure if I could do the diplomatic part of the duties. I was pretty much focused on doing, you know, technical reviews and having more of a research background, because I did bench work as well as, you know, review of documents, but they seemed to like my background. It was broad enough, but yet I had those critical skills that they needed, you know, critical thinking skills, the ability to write, and most of all, how you interact with your colleagues. Really, those soft skills are really essential. So if you have good interpersonal skills, that's definitely a plus. And so I entered in, around 2010, November of 2010, and I was given a flag on Flag Day, and I am fortunate that someone whispered in my ear a little earlier what the flag was, because I don't think I would have recognized it. It was a green black background with a big orange sun, and it turned out I was going to Bangladesh. And so went to Bangladesh for 2 years, got an opportunity to study Bangla, which was helpful. I was able to tenure in the language, because that's one of the things that Foreign Service officers need to do. You need to tenure or score high enough in a language that you have some proficiency in it. And I was able to work in the field with my colleagues. And to me, I was most excited about starting a project from the ground up, which was a food safety project. My next tour was in Afghanistan. It was a little different because in Bangladesh, I had the freedom to go into the field and to talk to our beneficiaries and really work with our implementing partners. In Afghanistan, because of the security situation, we were stuck behind a compound wall. So all our monitoring had to be done by a third party. So it was a little bit more challenging, but we all like challenges. And then, went back to DC for a couple of years, returned to Afghanistan. It was a completely different situation. And unfortunately, we worked remotely because of the pandemic. And then, as you know, unfortunately, the Taliban came in and kind of took over the country. And currently, I'm assigned to Haiti. And it's interesting because a lot of the lessons that I learned in Afghanistan have really helped me in Haiti. Haiti's also very insecure, so we have challenges going into the field. So we are starting to use a lot of third-party monitoring to monitor our programs. But I think you will enjoy the challenges as well as the opportunities. And I guess I said all this to say that you can have kind of, like I said, an eclectic background like I have, but fit in really well in foreign service because there's a lot of training that's done once you join aid. And then a lot of it is just skills that you already have that, you're just refining. So I don't want to take up a lot of time because I figure you might have questions for us at some point. So I'm going to pass the baton to Bill, and hopefully we'll get a chance to speak a little later. Thank you.
I'm going to give us a 1-minute tour around the world. And I believe you can see what I'm showing. Agriculture development helps farmers grow high value horticulture crops, rice, field crops. We help small farmers grow with their fish ponds for nutrition. And we do this with a value chain approach where we help bring agricultural technology to improve yields, to increase sales that increase farmer incomes. We leverage research and development to be able to bring product to market in greater quantities. And we work with agribusinesses and livestock and fisheries, ocean fisheries for natural resource management. And then we also improve technologies like this fish smoking project to more clean, hygienic, better processing. And we work in teams, and we work out of embassies to be able to do all of this work. And so that's what I wanted to be able to show you. And with that, I think we need to leave enough time for you to ask some questions. I'm going to stop sharing now.
Excellent. Thank you, Bill. Now we'll turn it over to you all, audience. Do you have any questions for any one of our presenters this evening? Okay. Imhotep, I see you have your hand raised, please.
Pardon the technical difficulties here with the camera. I have about 4 questions. I'll convey 2 verbally, and I'll leave the other 2, which may be a tad bit more trivial in the chat. So maybe a bit long, but please bear with me. I will drop them in the chat. So just really quick for context, interested in the program officer backstop, but also very much interested in the economic growth officer backstop or economist backstop. So I guess my first inquiry is like, obviously when joining the foreign service, it's based in like US foreign policy and interests. However, I think one officer kind of referenced engaging, larger US private sector enterprises. And I was just wondering, with engaging like smaller local enterprises, but bridging that gap to the larger US enterprises, I guess, how do program officers and or contracting officers kind of maintain that balance between those 2 entities to ensure that obviously like the larger US entities are obtaining competitive rates on local goods, but also ensuring that local entities obtain competitive rates and that the business partnership doesn't necessarily edge towards the exploitative end when doing business, and or are those kind of rates just negotiated exclusively between those 2 entities? That's the first inquiry, and I'll drop it in the chat once again. The second inquiry is a tad bit in the weeds, and I was just wondering, what does that formal process look like? Just when engaging local stakeholders, I assume government actors are those principal stakeholders when establishing CDCS priorities with the respective countries as it pertains to economic growth solutions within those countries. And yeah, thank you all so much for your time, counsel, and insight.
So that was you covered a couple of backstops with that. You asked the program officer backstop, and then you talked about being an economic growth or economist, which is the Backstop 11s. And the private enterprise officers also work with local and international companies as well. And I, because I've worked on tariffs and I've worked on sales for private sector development from those private sector partners. So I was going to say, like, so Bill helps them produce good goods and I help them sell it competitively, right? So that is how we work together. And the program officer ensures we have the right contracts in place and they give us the money to do it. And so it's really a symbiotic sort of relationship between all of them. But absolutely, actually, one of the things that wasn't mentioned is that digital is a part of every single backstop, right? Digital development. And we're using digital development to provide market prices for commodities, such as agricultural for locals. And we're doing this through apps and other means. So that's how we ensure. And that was one of the things actually that Mars Corporation was interested in. They wanted to make sure that the price they were paying to the I think it was called the Cacao Board, which was sets the prices for the local cacao farmers, what the farmers were getting based per kilo of goods based on what they were paying the board, and it was not sufficient. They thought the farmers were getting much more. So through working with USAID, we were able to ensure that those farmers got more money and that the Cacao Board was not taking all the profits away from the farmers. So I'll stop there and let somebody else sort of chime in on that.
Let me chime in on the CDCS one. And I want to say something. You got interested in multiple backstops. And so my advice to everyone is try and get in any backstop. Once you're in, it's possible to move around and change. I went back and forth. I come out of Peace Corps. I was really interested in kind of community health. And I just threw my name in the pot for everything and took the first one that came through. So absolutely, you can move around within the Foreign Service, learn new skills, expand, try new things. So don't let that fear be a barrier to trying, get your foot in the door. On the CDCS, yes, we do definitely work with government counterparts. In some countries, that is easier than in other countries, but it is always an important role. However, one of the things that the program office, I think primarily, but with the help of our technical offices and others, really focus on is when we're developing a strategy, we need to hear all voices. And so there were, and not just voices that we work with, but everywhere that I've worked on CDCSs, we've tried really hard to hear the voices of people we don't work with about what's important for USAID. What are we missing? And so, in places I've been, that's reaching out to young people, that's reaching out to opposition parties, that's reaching out to LGBTQI plus or Indigenous organizations. When I was in Ghana, it was really important that we were, because of the structural inequities within the country, making sure that we were getting all of the different ethnic, religious groups, and as well as North and South representation. And we were hearing all of those voices so that as we craft a 5-year strategy, we're not just doing development for the capital city, right? But that we're really able to reach the people and hearing those voices. And for me, that's one of the great parts about being in a program office. The strategies, the development for me is one of the greatest times because you really get out into the field and you talk to beneficiaries, you talk to just really anyone that will listen, anyone that will talk to you, and you learn. And if you're open to it, it really can change the way you think about development in that country and what's going to work or what's not going to work. USAID really tries not to do cookie cutter approaches where we say, well, it worked here, so we'll try it over there. But really trying to understand within the culture and the context what is going to work and not, and how do we adapt our strategies and our programming to be effective.
Thank you all for your insight.
I know we had another question. Shantae, did you still have a question there?
Yes, I had a question, but it was actually just answered with what Ms. Clare said. So thank you.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. All right. Do we have any other questions? I'm scrolling through the chat here. I see there's been some engagement there with some of the responses. Okay. Excellent. Excellent. Well, okay. Brooke, yes.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear.
Great. First of all, thank you very much for your time today. That's been really helpful. My questions are for Claire and Aaron on the program officer backstop. And I think what's really appealing about both of what you shared on this backstop as a whole is kind of the generalist and the ability to do a lot of different things. But could you go a little deeper on what your day-to-day or your maybe year would make more sense given the cycle of how you move through the countries in terms of whether or not you're able to specialize a little bit or support certain, like whether it's nutrition or the general work on maternal and child health? Like, can you kind of specialize in that sense, or are you as a program officer kind of at the whim of what's going on in the country at the time?
Aaron, do you want to shoot for it, or do you want me to say something?
You can start. I'll fill in. You have more experience.
I think where you work and what country you're in, it really defines kind of the technical areas that you're working in. And so there are people that have expertise, really strong health expertise in a program office, and they get to understand the ins and outs of the PEPFAR program, which is where we do our work on HIV/AIDS. And it's super complicated because of the role the State Department has in helping to coordinate all of the different agencies, CDC, others. So you can definitely learn technical skills and expertise in that area. Some people get a geographic focus because of a language. A lot of people who end up learning Spanish will stay and work in LAC because people speak Spanish in the office and really use it. Same for Russian speakers. and French in Francophone Africa. Often the program offices are big enough so that particularly early on in your career, you can focus on one area or another, you know, gender inclusive development or monitoring and evaluation. As you move up into, it turns more into a management job. And so, you know, I think one of the things that makes me a solid manager right now is that I worked early on. I worked in small missions where I could really learn the ins and outs of all of the different things that have to be done that our local staff do for us, and collaborating and listening and learning from them. And then, like in any organization, as you move up, you kind of move away from the specificity and more into people management, people support. And but definitely, I think we each bring our own passion to it and our own ideas and twist on what we're going to have our, you know, the special places in our heart that we want to work on. And that's just human nature.
Great, thank you, Claire. I think that is helpful. I'm coming from more of a technical background, both in nursing and in previous work in nutrition and HIV and TB. So I'm trying to kind of find out where I fit in the organization, whether it makes sense to stay technical, but there are elements of the program management that are very appealing. So it's been great to hear your perspective.
I started out as a social worker and in community health, so I completely get that.
That's all for me. Thank you.
Shantae, I see you have your hand raised.
Yes, first of all, thank you guys so much for sharing your experiences. My question is, have you guys ever had to revise a plan after getting more insight from like local NGOs, for example? And if so, how do you like navigate getting governments that citizens usually have a low trust in on board with revised plans?
You are so right about that. There is, particularly when you local entities, we talk about the business enabling environment or helping the private sector grow, but then they have this fear of becoming a legal entity where governments are going to look at you, perhaps you know, collect more taxes or come to you for a bribe or handout. That is always there in the background. And so it's really, you know, but we do work with what we call informal economies as well. And while we try to make them formal, because that sort of helps the governments have fiscal revenue that they're supposed to spend to provide infrastructure and support services to the people of the country. And we just try to instill those values as we go along. But it's a super tough connection to make, and we do work with a lot of local staff. In fact, when we were working around customs and immigration work as with some of our private sector companies, we worked with over 600 local entities in several countries to get their perspective on what was needed to make it better for them. And then what's great is then when you have big, like the big shipping company Maersk, when they come to that government and they say, this is what we've heard, this is what's going to make things easier. And if you make trade easier, the government's going to collect those tariffs at the border anyway. So this is for the private sector wanting to export goods, whether it's agricultural goods or other goods. Then, you know, then the government has a tendency to listen to some of these bigger players. And so now you've got their own local private sector that they're trying to impress because perhaps they want to get elected again, right? All those factors pull in and are part of the work that you do. And it's so interesting to be a part of that and help them amplify their voices through the work that we do, and amplify it through not only ourselves and the work that we do, but through other partners and through other U.S. government agencies. I hope that helped answer your question.
That did. Thank you so much.
Well, seeing as we are now approaching time, I'd like to take this moment to thank all of our colleagues at USAID for joining and speaking tonight, sharing your experiences and how rewarding a career can be working within USAID. Audience, please remember that you'll be able to find the recording of tonight's webinar within 48 hours on the Payne Fellowship YouTube channel. Also, please be sure to join us next week for the continuation of Backstop Week on Tuesday, October 17th, 2023 at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We will be joined by USAID representatives from Education, Health, and the Environment Backstops. Thank you all for joining. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now.